Hey guys, welcome back to the channel McNallie Money, the official home of power mining analysis. Our second stop on the Texas Tour 2.0 was the Dorothy 1 and 2 facility of Soluna Holdings in Silverton, Texas. This podcast is going to show you exactly what we saw on site, some insight, details, and behind the scenes photos of this facility. Before we get into it, take a second, smash the like button, guys. Big help to myself and the channel. If you're not already subscribed, McNallie Money, feel free to join and let us know in the comments section below if you're currently holding shares of Saluna and your outlook on this company moving forward. With that being said, let's get into today's video. Okay guys, day 2 of our Texas road trip is officially in the books. We've learned one thing down here, Anthony. Texas is a very large state. We drove 5.5 hours today, hardly made a dent in the state. However, we did make it to our next destination. We wanted to jump on and provide an update of the Soluna Holdings Dorothy facility. Now, yesterday was a double header. We already put out the iron video. We're going to be following that up tonight with the Soluna Holdings video. Now, this was a very interesting site. If you don't know a lot about Soluna, they operate on a renewable energy model behind the meter, harnessing wind power that would otherwise be wasted or grounded, really creating a unique business model and a scalable growth model moving forward. So Silverton, Texas is the location of the Soluna Dorothy facility, and we could see this one from miles away due to those wind farms.
We could, and 70 miles south of Amarillo. So for those of you that are more familiar with that as a city in Texas, Texas itself, Bryce. You're quite right. We didn't even make a dent in the country today. Texas, you could fit the United Kingdom in Texas nearly 3 times. That's the size of it. The journey we did today, if I left Southampton, I'd be in Scotland. And that just, I'd gone the length of England and I'd been in another country. So, and that's just to go from site to site, just to show you out there that we are dedicated to this job. We do like to go out and do visits, but I'm sure when we were planning this, I didn't think we realised the mileage we were doing some of these days. Fortunately now, we've covered a lot of the mileage already. We've got some shorter distances, but even these short distances, around about the 200-mile mark. So we've got a few of those to do over the next couple of days. But what struck me, Bryce, is we were getting closer to Silverton, the amount of these wind farms. And you could see, you kept asking me, "Are we nearly there? Is that Saluna? Is that Saluna?" And I'm like, I don't think it is, because it's like we've got 15 miles to go, but actually these wind farms go that long. And so before you knew it, you were coming up to the site, and it is just surrounded by these large propellers. And, with the wind yesterday, the majority of them were all working there. Now, we did hear from some of the power people that turned up on the site to welcome as well, from the power company. They don't necessarily have them switched on all the time. It's no use switch them off if you can't utilize the power. So on days like yesterday, when it was windy, the full benefit of their Saluna are taking that benefit all the time. And as you quite rightly say, having that wind farm and also having the attachment to the grid gives plenty of optionality to the company.
Yeah, it certainly does. Now, we've been covering Saluna for quite some time. They've really been in a prove-it model, building out these data centers. It's a very unique approach. We've talked about some of the larger miners going after these 100, 500 gigawatt sites. Saluna's really found their niche in some of these smaller renewable sites that have this captive energy. So we're going to talk about that theme throughout today's presentation, but it really does seem, using this modular design, they've got a proven model now. It's working, they're making money, and they're actually now having wind farms reach out to them to try and partner. One thing we learned there is a lot of these wind farm investors will actually invest in multiple different wind farms. And if they see something like this working at Dorothy 1, Dorothy 2, obviously they want to replicate that and make more money for themselves. So we're going to talk about that throughout the presentation. First stop here, we walked into the office. You can see Dorothy pictured on the wall there. So for those of you who are unfamiliar, Soluna actually names all of their sites after famous female scientists. Now, you're actually familiar with Dorothy, Anthony. Why don't you tell us a little bit about her?
Absolutely. Dorothy represents one of the NASA scientists who was able to sort of like do the mathematics behind one of the Apollo missions coming back into to Earth. And some of the NASA scientists themselves couldn't really do the calculations. They were trying to do the calculations, it kept failing. And Dorothy was a mathematician, and she realised that they hadn't quite been using the right methods to get to the calculation. And she, in a very challenging scenario, I mean, she was a black lady in a time when there was segregation and there was that unconscious bias towards her, and so it was a challenge. But very, very quickly they realised that she was extraordinary. And she was able to do these calculations with great ease, actually, even though they were very, very complex calculations. And she gained the trust of the project director and was able to do the calculations for them rockets to return to Earth in a safe manner. And so, as we've seen from all the projects that Soluna have, they represent women who have excelled in industry, and Dorothy excelled in the space age many years ago.
Now, you use the word extraordinary. I would use that to describe the Dorothy facility as well. Soluna really sits at the intersection of AI, energy, infrastructure. And as we walk through this facility, you can see how futuristic the design is. You'll notice with the Soluna layout, a very unique diamond layout for these modular data centers. Your first time viewing this slide, Anthony, you actually thought this was an AI generated image. It looks so
Yep.
futuristic. It's so clean, such sharp edges, and just immaculately put together.
I did, and I actually commented to John and said, "When are you going to start building these?" He goes, "Building them, that is the real picture. We have been building them. That's the completed picture." And I'm like, "But it looks so sort of like futuristic." And then when you get to the site, you see the layout there. And again, the site at Silverton, it's not as big as a Childress site. I mean, that was immense. But you know what? It's a big site. It's still a big site. These pictures don't do any of the sites justice, to be honest with you. And again, I wouldn't like to walk all around the site there. It's a 100 megawatt site in total. They have 98 megawatts now, supporting Dorothy 1, Dorothy 2. And they have 2 megawatts now, which they're going to focus on delivering Grace, Project Grace, which is a 2 megawatt, effectively high performance compute project that will really showcase the ability of Soluna delivering the HPC strategy on a project level scale. And if you look at their project list going forward over the next sort of 2 to 3 years, you can see some of the sites there are 100 megawatts, 125 megawatts, 150 megawatts. If they can deliver this 2 megawatts, like we've seen the Wolf Den, so TeraWolf had the Wolf Den, we've seen other companies as well have these smaller projects to start with, prove to the market the concept, the capabilities of the company that can deliver that then. And then once that's been done there, you then have the conversation with clients, say, we can scale this up to a 50 to 100 to 150 megawatts. So this is proof of concept. And Project Grace will probably start to be, to be delivered now over this probably next, 6 to 12 months, and then get that moving then. And it's great that Soluna don't have to focus on really one project at a time. Going back from the past there, they didn't really have the capital. We spoke about Soluna Holdings, 6, 8 months ago, and we were saying, the market capitalization was under $10 million. They were really small, and they were just, even the assets on the balance sheet was significantly higher than that. And it was just having that challenge to growth. And bear in mind, all the other miners at this stage were really low prices. Iron was in the $5 mark. And mentioning iron, actually, if I go back 4 years ago when they started with half an exahash. Look at them now, the largest Bitcoin miner by market cap. They have the largest site with the power there. Soluna could be the iron in 4 years' time if they start delivering through these projects. One thing they have got over everybody else at the moment is the fact they've got these wind farms at every one of their locations. It's not just the Silverton location. This is at all their locations. And if they can continue to achieve that blended power price of about 3 cents, this is going to give them the competitive advantage against all the other peer miners in the space trying to deliver Bitcoin mining stroke HPC.
Yeah, you really hit the nail on the head. Now we're going to talk about power strategy in a second, but seeing as this is a Texas site, we wanted to talk about this concern we heard from TeraWulf, this SB6 ruling that really takes a look at the power backlog within the ERCOT system. As mentioned, around 200 gigawatts. Now, after talking to Asher, it sounds like this is really meant to weed out some of the players that maybe don't have the capital, don't have the budget to fully develop these sites. He was actually looking at this as a way of kind of weeding out the fake competition. We asked the team at Soluna about this, specifically behind the meter. Some of the power experts said, hey, they're starting to focus on that. It takes power away from the grid before it's able to get into the grid. And again, Soluna's got this competitive advantage because they're going after these stranded pockets of energy that not only other miners maybe are overlooking, but would otherwise be wasted. So if we look at their metering layout here, very interesting. They've got grid connection, of course, so they've got that backup power. Again, 345 kilovolt lines coming into the facility. They've also got these 34.5 kilovolt lines coming from the wind farm itself. This is going to ensure grid telemetry. They feed into a substation, and from there, they're able to distribute the power throughout their facility. Now, based on the amount of wind that's happening that day, they can fluctuate between the percentages of grid and wind. But you just alluded to the fact, Anthony, using this hybrid approach, they're able to achieve some of the best power in the entire sector.
Yeah, and let's give some context to the switching here. So from grid to wind, I asked the question about, tell me about what a bad month looks like in terms of how much wind to how much grid. A bad month is probably 50% wind power, 50% grid, and a good month is significantly more wind power. And so that's how you see this blended rate get to really low amounts there. And the benefit of this is not just to Saluna. No, no, no. This is to the clients of Soluna. Soluna is predominantly a hosting mining company. They do have a small amount, probably about 700 petahash of self-mining, but they have significantly more. It's around about 4 exahash at the moment, and that's going to grow even more in the new year when we see the likes of Galaxy start moving their machines to Project Catty. Now we know the infrastructure, even though that site has only just broken ground, they've started now to receive the infrastructure for that site, and it can be put up extremely quickly. And then in the sort of first quarter of 2026, we'll start seeing those machines coming across from Galaxy, and there's a significant amount there. Remember, Galaxy had a lot of machines at the Helios site, which they've now decided they're going to optimize that for HPC. So they had to move their Bitcoin mining. And this is going to happen with a number of miners out there. You know, I mean, we were at Childress yesterday. They've got 40 exahash there. And during the conversations, they were talking about, Horizon 1 and 2 being completed in the very, very near future, but Horizon 3 to 10. This is another 400 megawatts of HPC with an extra 200 megawatts of supporting power. So that's 600 megawatts. That's going to go effectively where the miners are now. So there'll be companies out there that need additional space for miners. And Soluna stand in a very, very good situation at the moment. They have projects that they're currently now finalizing and projects coming online. And it just might be timing wise a really good enabler for them to achieve more clients and to fill those new sites as they come live. And with the capital coming in, they've managed to borrow capital. They may have more levers to pull now that their market capitalization is significantly higher from that figure I quoted earlier, a lot higher than that, which gives them more opportunities to raise capital, more bigger clients out there. In terms of the likes of Galaxy as well, that will open doors for them to raise capital as well. And you might see them able to do more than one project in parallel at the same time, delivering these facilities in readiness for either high performance compute or to maintain this Bitcoin hosting strategy, which has proved to have great margins for Soluna.
Yeah, it certainly has. I was going to talk about the hosting strategy next. So after we learned about the power, we looked at the substation, we walked into some of these buildings. Now, the way they've set this up, very customizable, very white glove service. So each one of their hosted clients, you just mentioned Obviously, Galaxy, they've got Compass, they've got a number of very high profile companies in here, each with a slightly different partnership or relationship. So you can get that customization. We walked into these buildings and you can see this term relentless stewardship. Everything they think about is client focused here. So whether you're talking about the filtration, proprietary design, you'll notice that the vents come in horizontally, increasing airflow by 4 times over a vertical filtration system. Inside the buildings, immaculate, extremely clean, similar to what we saw at the iron facility. And lucky for us, they actually allowed us to fire up one of these buildings. Just incredible to see how quickly this power can come on and offline using their Maestro system, which is essentially the software stack on top of the bare metal.
Yeah, I mean, you had the lucky opportunity to switch on. I was filming that particular point there, but it literally was probably half a minute, 30 seconds from pressing that button to seeing the power come on there. And if you just look at the customers that are operating at Dorothy itself at the moment, you've got the likes of Bit Digital, you've got Bitmine, you've got Compass, you've got Blockware. So lots of these companies, and I also heard that one of the clients now is actually going to be based there, looking after their area. So this is another concept that Soluna are doing. They're doing bespoke hosted mining there. So there's different types of packages that they're able to offer. So they've obviously done the business model. I mean, I know a lot of the miners that we talk about from a self-mine perspective, like the Hives and the DMGs and the Bit Farms. Many, many, many years ago, these were also companies that hosted mining machines, but then decided that the self-mining was more profitable. And then we sort of like spoke to BitDeer a couple of years ago because they had a significant amount of hosted, and they explained really the hosting is a really profitable business to be in if it's done properly, if you've got the right level of energy power. And the fact is, even in a bear market, it actually becomes more beneficial to have that type of strategy because you are bringing in your margin. You are charging a hosting fee that comes in. That comes in as a given. So Soluna, having this strategy to have that 4 exahash of hash rate under management with a certain amount of growth to that looks like it could grow to probably 6, 7, 8 exahash in the early parts of next year. Once Galaxy start adding to that, that's going to bring them a nice cash flow, nice margin in there at the same time like that. As they go along delivering all their other projects, Project Catty's, is starting to be on that's 166 megawatts, and there are a list of other projects that are in the pipeline for them to do as well. So it's just managing their own expectations by delivering these projects as and when the right level of capital and the right timing is there for them to do so.
Yeah, you're sure right there. Now, we asked the question, how did you guys think of it? Why are your designs so much different? Why is your filtration different? Why are the air intakes different? The layout of these modular buildings. And after talking with the team, a very diverse group, we even had individuals that came from a military defense background at Lockheed Martin, and they said, a lot of this training or information that they've brought over to Soluna is actually based on the experience they've had in these other sectors. So you look even at the thermal simulations here, for example, these windmills are able to turn 360 degrees. They analyze the wind flow for the entire year and then optimize the site so that every single side of these data centers is getting that pure airflow. We walk through the center of the diamond. That's essentially the hot aisle. You can really feel the temperature change. But looking at these thermal simulations, the cooling cross section, you can tell that there's a tremendous amount of foresight put into this build.
There is, and actually, me being sort of like the more entrepreneurial part of the duo here was actually suggesting maybe some sort of a laundering facility could be sort of installed there, using that hot air. Once the sheets and the pillowcases have been washed there, they could be dried very, very quickly in the centre of these things there. But joking aside, it looks like they've really got a significant design there. And it gives them a sort of a competitive advantage against peers there because they've really looked into the airflow here, and you could tell from the external and also from the internal how the system was working with the filters there, with the spacing. The spacing was really important because as air comes through, and if any dust particles aren't picked up by the filters, then they're likely to fall in the first 1 to 2 feet from coming through the actual ducts, and they have something like probably a 6 to 7 feet gap between the actual wall of the infrastructure and the actual the mining machines themselves. So again, it's like, the worst case scenario, if any dust does get through the filters, and these filters are blown every day and are changed every quarter. There is controls in place to make sure that these PDUs don't start having that dust entering their systems.
Yeah, now they talked about the innovation between Dorothy 1 and Dorothy 2. One example of that was they actually installed fans on the PDUs to help cool them down. The PDUs themselves were overheating, let alone the miners. So they innovated there. They also brought all these controls down so it's accessible for the technicians. They're really proving that Soluna is finding a way to focus this renewable energy on compute, on AI, HPC, Bitcoin mining. Now, the thing for me is really the scale or the runway in front of this company. We heard from Asher, they've started bucketing their power pipeline into different, containers. Soluna's done a very similar thing. And if you look at their pipeline compared to the size of the company and the market cap, it's quite incredible. We've learned extensively this year that power is the bottleneck. Soluna, no shortage of power.
Absolutely. And, they were probably one of the first miners to come out with and suggest they had this pipeline of power. And yes, the pipeline of power at the moment is 2.8 gigawatts of power. It sounds a lot there for a company that have got approximately just over 100 megawatts actually in use at the moment. So not much more than that, maybe 120, 150 megawatts. But they break it down as to how they've got to that figure there. And you can see that shovel ready. PPA agreements or signed term sheets at the moment account for around about nearly 700 megawatts. And then they've got active term sheet negotiations. So those that they're really progressing there, another 850. And so, it doesn't take long to start adding these figures up there. You get a total long-term pipeline, 2.8 gigawatts. And that gives them sort of like plenty of opportunity, flexibility, sort of like future-proofing effects of the company, because if they can get to the stage where they're using anywhere near that amount of power, Saluna will be a significantly bigger company than they are today, because they'll have a lot more projects in place. Hopefully, Project Grace, which is a key element of that 2 megawatt test and try concept building that they'll have there to deliver HPC. If they can manage to do what TeraWulf did with the Wolf Den, then who knows where this company could go, because the Wolf then now have got nearly 500 megawatts of power supporting HPC compute power. And who's to say Saluna, with the power plant they got, can't be in that same position in the near future?
Yeah, really going after this hybrid AI Bitcoin hosting model using renewable. And for me, what really shone through was the quality of the build, the cleanliness of the facility, the professionalism of the staff. Although maybe smaller than some of their peers, this company is run to a T, and you can really see that through their execution.
Yeah, I'd go as long as saying Saluna are certainly sort of, I'd say they're punching above their weight. They're doing more than you look at these companies and you look at there's probably, 7 or 8 companies now that are well over 4 billion market capitalization. And you've got then the really big ones, Cypher and Iron, sort of leading the way there with Wright and Mara just behind. These are big billion-dollar companies. But when you look at what power they've got, and then you compare to what Soluna are doing now, then there's a disparity in the sort of like the market capitalization of some of these areas here, because Soluna aren't sort of like, if you look at their market capitalization of say just over 100 million dollars compared to sort of like the 16-17 billion dollars that we've seen for Iron, it doesn't mean that necessarily there's that difference in multiples in terms of power. So I think they may have been overlooked there. I think people need to do more due diligence. I'm hoping that people watching this podcast will get a little bit more information, having gone to the sites and looked at what they've got there, and the fact that they can rinse and repeat this very, very quickly at their other sites, the fact they're able to now focus on not just one project at a time, they'll be able to do at least 2 at the time, because they've got more access to capital. That $100 million of capital that they've recently been able to utilize is going to give them a lot more power in terms of their own destiny. If you're going along with the clients and you have to get a funding partner. That funding partner is going to want paying back before you have a real sense of sharing the future profits. Now, with capital in hand, it gives an opportunity to negotiate a deal, which means they may be able to get a larger amount of the revenues or a large percentage of revenues a little bit quicker.
Yeah, no, I'll leave you with a couple closing thoughts here. They voted just recently here to increase the authorized share count. That went through, so that's going to give Soluna a lot of flexibility. Now, keep in mind, authorized shares doesn't mean issued shares. So they haven't done any dilution as of yet, but if and when that opportunity comes, now they're prepared to do that. The other thing that really stuck with me, all of these other hyperscalers, neo clouds, Bitcoin miners, etc., are fighting over megawatts, paying top dollar, tooth and nail, fighting for these sites. Meanwhile, again, Soluna has renewable wind farms calling them to try and partner with them. So again, a very differentiated business model, an absolutely fantastic trip. We really appreciate everyone who contributed to this, all the hospitality. And I'll give it to you for closing thoughts, Anthony. But I got to say, Iron was a tough act to follow, and Soluna delivered.
Saluna definitely delivered yesterday. In fact, yesterday was a fantastic day all round. We had the sheer, the size of children yesterday to see what they're doing on the scale they're doing it at, but then also to look at a smaller a company who are also delivering, something on a big scale. Those sites are enormous. As I say to you, there's a lot of infrastructure at Silverton there, and that's just one of their sites. So, they're building, a lot more out there, and this is just the start. Iron started at half an exahash. 4 years later, they're at 50 exahash. Bear that in mind when you watch this podcast and see where Soluna might end up in the next 3 to 4 years.
Yeah, it's a really good point. Now, we've tried to give you guys as much insight and information as possible, but if you do have any additional questions about Soluna for the team, feel free to leave them in the comments section below. We'll direct those over to the company. We really appreciate you guys watching these videos. Thank you so much. Feel free to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel. Next up this week, we've got Mara, Riot, and BitDeer. So make sure you guys tune in for those videos as well. Our trip is not even yet half over and more to come. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you then.